The woman I chose because she seemed completely uninterested in money was the only person who discovered I had lied before I confessed. For 8 months, I pretended to be a struggling furniture repairman living in a rented apartment. I drove an old truck, wore work boots, and counted every dollar when we went out. What she did not know was that I owned the restoration company, the warehouse, and several properties through a family trust. I hid the truth because my last relationship had ended the moment my fiancé learned what I was worth. I wanted someone who loved the life I showed her. Then, one evening, the woman I planned to marry placed a photograph on my kitchen table and said, "Before you tell me who you really are, I need to tell you who I am." Her secret was larger than mine, and unlike my lie, hers had been protecting someone else. I was 44 when I met Elena Marquez. My name is David Mercer, and I lived in Asheville, North Carolina. Most people in town knew Mercer Heritage Woodworks as a respected restoration and custom millwork company. We repaired historic windows, rebuilt staircases, restored church interiors, and reproduced architectural details for old hotels, courthouses, and private homes. My grandfather started the business with 2 employees. My father expanded it. I took over after his death and spent 15 years turning it into a company with 63 employees, a mill, a finishing shop, and contracts across 3 states. The business made money, not glamorous technology money, steady, asset-heavy, old industry money. I also inherited several commercial buildings through a trust my father created. At 44, I had a net worth large enough to change how people behaved around me. That statement sounds arrogant. It also became my excuse for dishonesty. 3 years before meeting Elena, I was engaged to a woman named Brooke Ellis. Brooke worked in luxury real estate. She was intelligent, social, and beautiful in the polished way that made every room seem like an event. When we began dating, she believed I was a successful contractor. I did not hide the company. I did hide the trust and properties because I considered them private. 6 months into our relationship, she learned the full picture through a charity board member. After that, small things changed. She began calling my home an investment opportunity. She pushed for a larger wedding because our guests would expect a certain standard. She suggested I sell 2 older buildings and buy vacation property. When I hesitated, she accused me of having a scarcity mindset. The relationship became a negotiation about resources. I ended the engagement after discovering she had discussed a future prenuptial agreement with her attorney before I had proposed one. That alone was not betrayal. Planning is sensible. The betrayal was that she had already drafted terms assuming access to family properties and had told a friend she could work around my caution after marriage. I felt foolish. Then I became suspicious of everyone. My sister, Claire, told me Brooke had not created my fear. She only gave it a story, Claire said. Claire was 41, married, and one of the few people who spoke to me without protecting my ego. She believed I should date honestly. I believed honesty made authentic connection impossible. We argued. Then I created the plan. I rented a modest 1-bedroom apartment above a bakery in West Asheville. I began driving an old company pickup that had been removed from regular service. I told people I worked as an independent furniture repairman for a subcontractor. That was not entirely false. I still enjoyed hands-on restoration and often worked at the bench. I stopped attending public business events. I used my middle name, James, on a dating profile. I did not change my legal identity. I simply allowed strangers to assume I was an employee living month to month. I told myself this was privacy. It was deception. Elena entered my life at a community repair workshop. A local nonprofit hosted monthly events where volunteers fixed household items people could not afford to replace. Small furniture, lamps, bicycles, appliances. I volunteered under the name James. Elena brought in a wooden music box with a broken hinge. It had belonged to her grandmother. She was 39, with dark hair, calm eyes, and the kind of attention that made you feel she heard the sentence beneath the one you spoke. I examined the box. The hinge can be replaced. Will it look new? No. Good. That answer made me look at her. Most customers wanted restoration to erase age. Elena said, "My grandmother's hands wore the finish. I do not want someone else's idea of perfect replacing that." I repaired the hinge. She asked what she owed. The workshop was free. She left a donation anyway. Then she stayed to help organize tools. We spoke for an hour. She worked as an administrative coordinator at a neighborhood health clinic. She lived with her 12-year-old niece, Sophia. Her sister, Marisol, had died 4 years earlier after a long illness. Elena had become Sophia's guardian. There was no dramatic romance that day. She thanked me. I thought about her afterward. A month later, she returned with a kitchen chair. The chair did not need much repair. I suspected she knew that. I asked her to coffee. Our first date cost less than $20. We sat outside a small cafe. Elena drank tea and asked questions about wood, old houses, and why I enjoyed fixing things. I said, "Broken things usually tell you what happened if you look closely." She smiled. "People do too." That should have warned me. We dated slowly. Elena had responsibilities. Sophia came first. Homework, school counseling, soccer practice, medical appointments related to a chronic asthma condition. Elena did not ask me to meet Sophia for 2 months. When I did, the girl was polite and suspicious. She wanted to know whether I had children. No. Whether I had ever been married. No. Whether I knew how to cook. 3 meals. That means no. Elena laughed. The rented apartment became part of the lie. It was small, but comfortable. I furnished it with pieces I restored myself. Elena liked the place. She never suggested improvement. When the bakery downstairs filled the stairwell with bread smells at 5 in the morning, she said it was better than an alarm clock. I paid for dates carefully, sometimes suggesting inexpensive options. She contributed without making a point of it. Once, I said I could not afford a weekend trip she mentioned. She answered, "Then we do something else." No disappointment, no manipulation. That reaction strengthened my belief that the plan worked. It also made the lie harder to justify. I told her Mercer Heritage was a company that subcontracted some of my work. She asked whether I wanted to open my own shop. I said, "Maybe someday." She encouraged me. "You know more than you admit," she said. I nearly told her then. Instead, I kissed her. Secrecy often survives because intimacy can postpone difficult sentences. Claire hated the arrangement. She met Elena once at a casual dinner. I introduced Claire as my sister and said she worked in property management. That was technically true. Claire managed part of the family trust. Afterward, she cornered me in the parking lot. "She is serious about you." "I know. Does she know your name is David?" "She knows James is my middle name." "That is not what I asked. I am protecting myself. You are testing her without consent." That phrase stayed with me, testing her. I had created conditions she did not know were an exam. Every generous choice became evidence. Every mention of money became suspicious. Elena could not pass because I controlled the questions and withheld the rules. Still, I continued. I told myself I would confess when I knew the relationship was real. Real kept moving farther away. 6 months in, I fell in love. Not because Elena ignored money, because she cared about details no one performed for. She remembered the anniversary of my father's death after I mentioned it once. She brought Sophia to the Mill's public craft fair without knowing I owned it. I attended as a volunteer and watched Elena buy a small cutting board from one of my apprentices. She said, "Whoever runs this place trains people well." Pride and shame arrived together. Sophia began trusting me. She asked for help building a bookshelf. We used reclaimed oak. She painted one shelf blue. I said the color ruined the wood. She said, "Then don't look at that part." I laughed harder than the joke deserved. I imagined a life with both of them. That was when my deception became unforgivable. I was no longer hiding from a stranger. I was allowing a child and her guardian to plan emotionally around a person who did not exist exactly as presented. The midpoint began with a medical bill. Sophia had a severe asthma attack and spent 2 nights in the hospital. Insurance covered most costs. But Elena faced deductibles, missed work, and prescription expenses. I offered to help. She refused. "You have your own rent. I have savings. So do I." She paid the bills. A week later, I overheard her speaking to the clinic's financial counselor. She asked about a payment plan. I felt sick. I could have paid the amount without noticing. Instead, I had created a reality where accepting help from me seemed irresponsible. That night, I drove to my actual house. It sat empty outside town, maintained by a caretaker while I lived in the apartment. I walked through rooms filled with inherited furniture and heard Claire's accusation. Testing her without consent, I decided to confess. Then Elena disappeared for 3 days. She said a family matter required travel to Charlotte. She would explain later. Her phone remained on. She messaged regularly. Still, something changed. When she returned, she seemed distracted. I asked whether she was in trouble. No. Is Sophia okay? Yes. Then what happened? She said, someone from my past contacted me. I waited. She did not explain. For the first time, I felt the fear of being the person outside a secret. The irony was deserved. 2 weeks later, a black SUV followed us from a restaurant. Elena noticed it. She guided me into a grocery store, called someone, and waited near security until the vehicle left. I asked what was happening. She said she did not know. I did not believe her. The next morning, I found an envelope pushed beneath my apartment door. Inside was a photograph of Elena standing beside an older man in front of a courthouse. The man was familiar. His name was Rafael Marquez, founder of Marquez National Foods, a privately held distribution company headquartered in Texas. He had appeared in business magazines and won legal investigation involving labor practices. The note said, "Ask her why she changed her name and disappeared." Elena's last name was Marquez, common enough that I had never connected it. I called her. She arrived within an hour. I placed the photograph on the table. She stared at it, then sat down. "Before you tell me who you really are," she said, "I need to tell you who I am." My body went cold. "You know? I know you own Mercer Heritage." "How long?" 3 months. The room became silent. She had discovered me before I discovered her. She said a clinic donor recognized me at a fundraiser photograph and asked why I had introduced myself as James. Elena searched public records. She found the company, property transfers, and charity filings. She did not confront me because she wanted to understand why I lied. "Why stay?" I asked. "Because I was lying too." Then she told me the larger secret. Rafael Marquez was her father, not estranged uncle, not distant relative. Father. Elena had grown up in a wealthy family near San Antonio. Marquez National Foods supplied restaurants, schools, and grocery chains across several states. Rafael built the company with his brother. Elena's mother died when Elena was 16. After that, her father became controlling. He expected Elena and Marisol to join the family business. Marisol complied. Elena became a social worker instead. Rafael treated independence as betrayal. He controlled money through trusts, housing, employment, and family loyalty. When Marisol developed ovarian cancer, she returned to the family home with Sophia. Rafael paid for specialists and used that support to control every decision. Elena became Marisol's advocate. She challenged doctors, questioned expenses, and eventually discovered Rafael had placed Sophia's inheritance into a family trust he controlled. Marisol's will named Elena as Sophia's guardian. Rafael expected custody to pass to him. After Marisol died, he fought Elena, not because she was unfit, because Sophia was a Marquez child and represented the next generation. The custody case became ugly. Rafael's attorneys examined Elena's finances, relationships, and work. Elena won guardianship. Then she left Texas. She used her mother's maiden name professionally for a time, moved twice, and kept distance from family publicity. The photograph came from the courthouse during the final custody hearing. I asked why the SUV followed us. "Dad's investigator." "Is that legal? Following in public can be." "Why now?" Rafael's health was failing. He wanted contact with Sophia before revising his estate plan. He had begun pressuring Elena again. The trip to Charlotte had been a meeting with his attorney. What does he want? For Sophia to spend summers in Texas and attend college through the family foundation. That sounds generous. It comes with trustees, conditions, and access. I understood. My family trust had protected assets. Her family trust had become a cage. Elena's secret was not that she came from money, it was that she had walked away from it to protect a child from control. I felt ashamed of my experiment. I had pretended to be poor because I feared being used. Elena had lived modestly because wealth had been used against her. Our lies looked similar from the outside. Their motives and consequences were different. I confessed fully. My name, the company, the properties, the trust, Brooke, the rented apartment, the deliberate test. Elena listened, then asked, "How long were you going to keep deciding whether I was safe?" "I was going to tell you." "When?" "Now." "Because you chose to, or because you were exposed?" I had no good answer. She stood. "I need time." I asked whether we were over. "I don't know." She left. For 3 weeks we barely spoke. Sophia sent me a photograph of the blue bookshelf with one message. "Are you still fake poor?" I replied, "I was dishonest. Your aunt will decide what happens next." The child's directness hurt less than silence. Claire was furious when she learned everything, not at Elena, at me. It was to be opened if Raphael attempted to change Sophia's guardianship or control her inheritance. The letter explained why Marisol chose Elena. Raphael had used company funds and family trusts to cover financial misconduct by his brother years earlier. Marisol knew. She feared Sophia's inheritance would become leverage or be exposed to claims if family assets were challenged. She instructed that Sophia's assets remain outside Raphael's control. The letter included copies of internal transfers and correspondence. Not enough to prove every allegation alone, enough to create serious legal and reputational risk if disclosed. Raphael's attorney requested a private meeting. Elena invited me only after asking whether I could attend without trying to solve everything. I can try. That is not confidence. It is honesty. We met in a conference room in Charlotte. Raphael attended by video because of his health. He was 72, pale and still commanding. He looked at Elena as if years apart were a scheduling problem. "You are keeping my granddaughter from her family," Elena replied. "I am keeping her from being managed." He accused her of poisoning Sophia. Then he noticed me. "You are the furniture man. I own the company." His expression changed slightly. Wealth made me more credible to him. That disgusted me, because I recognized the same reflex in myself. Raphael proposed a settlement, education fund, medical trust, annual visits, confidentiality regarding Marisol's letter. Elena said no. He became angry. "You would deny a child millions because of your pride?" Elena answered, "You are offering money in exchange for authority." He said authority was responsibility. She said responsibility does not require control over her guardian. The meeting continued for 2 hours. I spoke only when asked. That restraint was difficult. Finally, Raphael asked Elena what she wanted. Create an irrevocable trust with an independent corporate trustee. No family control, no visitation conditions, no confidentiality tied to Sophia's support. You may request contact through me, and she may choose as she grows older. He refused. The meeting ended. 2 days later, Raphael's company faced a separate regulatory investigation unrelated to Marisol's documents. The timing increased his legal risk. He returned to negotiation, not because his heart changed, because leverage did. The final agreement created an independent trust for Sophia's education and health care. Raphael received no control. Visitation remained voluntary and supervised initially. Marisol's documents stayed with attorneys, available if the agreement was violated. No grand courtroom victory, no billionaire grandfather defeated publicly. A private arrangement shaped by evidence, law, and fear of exposure. Sophia met him once by video, then twice in person. She asked difficult questions. Raphael answered some and avoided others. Their relationship remained limited. That was Sophia's choice. The conflict with Elena was harder. After the legal settlement, she agreed to meet me at the repair workshop where we first met. The music box sat on the table. She had brought it deliberately. She said, "You repaired the hinge without removing the marks." "Yes, but with us, you created a false surface." "I know. Why should I trust the person beneath it?" I said, "You should not yet." That was the right answer. I offered transparency, not access to every dollar as proof of love. Full truth about my life. She could meet my employees, visit my home, review the public records, speak to Claire, and ask anything. She said, "That still gives you control, because you decide what to display." What would not? Time. So we used time. We began again slowly. No apartment performance, no expensive gestures. I moved back into my actual house, though I kept the apartment lease until it ended. Elena visited the mill. Employees greeted me as owner. She watched how I spoke to apprentices and managers. She saw flaws. I was impatient during production delays. I avoided conflict by becoming overly formal. I liked being obeyed more than I admitted. She did not romanticize me. That helped. I met her attorney and learned the guardianship boundaries. I did not insert myself into Sophia's trust. When I offered to pay a remaining medical balance, Elena refused. Later, after we became engaged, we created clear financial agreements, a prenuptial agreement, separate premarital assets, a shared household account, no role for me in Sophia's inheritance, no role for Elena in the family business unless separately employed under normal governance. The documents did not insult love, they protected choice. Brooke had taught me to fear planning. Elena taught me planning could be honest when both people participated. We married 2 years after meeting. Small ceremony at a restored inn Mercer Heritage had worked on. I paid market price. Elena insisted. Sophia stood beside her. Claire gave a toast in which she said, "David finally learned that trust is not a test someone passes without knowing they are taking it." Everyone laughed. I deserved it. Raphael did not attend. He sent a letter to Sophia, not us. He died the following year. His estate plan honored the independent trust agreement. Marquez National Foods passed to professional management and family shareholders. Elena inherited a minority interest she could not easily sell for several years. That created another irony. She became wealthy again on paper. She did not hide it. We discussed taxes, governance, and whether retaining the shares conflicted with her values. She chose to keep them temporarily while advocating for labor and compliance reforms through shareholder channels. Not every inheritance must be rejected to preserve integrity. Sometimes responsibility means using a position carefully. Sophia is 18 now. She plans to study respiratory therapy. Her trust could pay for any university. She chose a state school with a strong clinical program. I asked whether she selected it to prove money did not matter. She said, "No, I selected it because the dorms have windows that open." Fair enough. Elena and I have been married 4 years. We still disagree about money. She believes I sometimes use generosity to avoid vulnerability. I believe she sometimes rejects help to prove independence. Both patterns come from old wounds. We name them. We do not call them character. That difference helps. I sold the rented apartment furniture to the bakery owner when the lease ended. I kept one chair. The first chair Elena brought to the workshop. She admitted later the loose joint was minor. She had wanted a reason to see me. That confession remains my favorite secret. People hear our story and focus on wealth. A rich man pretends to be poor. The woman he chooses is secretly from an even wealthier family. It sounds like a game of hidden fortunes. The money mattered. The deeper secret was what each of us believed money revealed. I believed wealth attracted dishonest love. Elena believed wealth could turn family care into control. I hid assets to test desire. She hid history to protect a child. Neither of us was completely honest. But our lies were not equal simply because both involved money. Intent matters. Impact matters more. My deception denied Elena the chance to decide whether she wanted the real arrangement. Her secrecy protected Sophia from renewed pressure while she evaluated whether I was safe. She still owed me truth once our relationship became serious. She admitted that. I still carried the greater responsibility because I built the relationship as an experiment. That admission was necessary before forgiveness. I no longer pretend to be poor. I also no longer lead with wealth. There is a difference between privacy and falsehood. Privacy says, "I am not ready to share that." Falsehood creates a life designed to make someone answer a question they do not know has been asked. I know that now. True love did not appear because Elena chose me while believing I had little money. True love became possible only after both performances ended. After she saw my fear, control, pride, and actual life. After I saw her family history, legal burden, protectiveness, and refusal to be purchased. We did not prove love by ignoring money. We proved it by discussing money, without allowing it to decide who had authority over the other. I pretended to be poor to find true love. The woman I chose had a bigger secret. She came from the kind of wealth I feared, but she understood its danger better than I did. Her secret did not make my lie harmless. It forced me to see why I had lied. I was not only afraid of being used, I wanted control over uncertainty. I wanted to inspect another person's character without exposing my own. Love does not work under those conditions. A person cannot consent to a relationship with a role you invented. The music box still sits in our living room. The new hinge is visible if you look closely. So are the worn places from Elena's grandmother's hands. Nothing was polished into false perfection. That is what our marriage became. Repaired, useful, marked, and honest enough to show where it had once broken. A year after our wedding, Elena and I returned to the community repair workshop as regular volunteers. One Saturday, a young couple brought in a dining chair they had purchased secondhand. The husband kept apologizing because they could not afford a new set. I heard my old assumptions immediately. Poor meant vulnerable. Rich meant powerful. Honest meant uninterested in money. Life had taught me those categories were too simple. I showed them how to tighten the joints and replace the missing brace. They did most of the work. When the chair stood firm, the wife said, "It still looks old." Elena answered, "Old is not the same as broken." She looked at me when she said it. Later, while we packed tools, I asked whether that was meant for the chair. Mostly. We had both spent years believing a safer life required becoming difficult to read. I used an apartment and old truck. She used distance and silence. Now, our safety came from agreements, boundaries, and the freedom to ask questions without being punished for the answer. That kind of trust is slower than romance built on mystery. It is less dramatic. It survives ordinary days. For me, that became the clearest sign that I had finally found what I was pretending to search for. There was one final lesson I did not understand until Sophia began dating. She introduced us to a young man who came from a wealthy family and seemed embarrassed by it. He avoided mentioning his parents' business, paid for everything in cash, and tried to look less privileged than he was. I recognized myself immediately. After dinner, I told Sophia privately that he appeared to be hiding important parts of his life. She said, "Maybe he wants to know whether I like him." I answered, "Then he should let you decide with the truth." The words sounded simple. They had taken me years to earn. Sophia later told him she would not continue the relationship unless he stopped performing a version of himself. He became defensive, then honest. Their relationship did not last, but it ended without betrayal. Watching her set that boundary showed me the difference between protecting privacy and manipulating perception. The younger version of me would have admired his caution. The man I became understood that love cannot be proven through traps. It can only be built where both people are allowed to know what they are choosing.